This is an instructional video on loading the traditional round ball muzzle loading rifle. And what we're going to be talking about in this video are the techniques for practical field loading as opposed to the ultimate in accuracy target shooting. And it's my contention that what we're going to show you is pretty much what would have been the standard in the field of the day. A lot of muzzleloaders are fooling around with a ball and patch combination that are way too tight. Obviously, in the old days when you had people who were interested in doing you seriously bodily harm or dangerous critters like bears, you couldn't be messing around with a rifle that was hard to load. Now, you do give up something in accuracy, that's undeniable, but you still have practical accuracy. And by practical accuracy, instead of minute of angle, we're talking about minute of whitetail. Now, when I was a boy, I was taught that if you could keep all your shots on a dinner plate at the distance that you were likely to shoot a deer, you were good to go. And I think that's still pretty true. What we're going to be trying today is shooting at 50 yards, and partly that's because that's about a good average shot in the Ozarks for deer hunting, and also because my eyes are not what they once were. And what we're going to be shooting at, because it gives us a big space in case we goof up and miss, are some of these military reduced range targets. And just to see how we can do, we're going to be trying shooting at this little itty bitty 300 meter reduced target. Now, as you can see by the size of my hand, that's not very big, but I think I can see it at 50 yards, and let's see what kind of group we can come up with. What we're shooting today is Lyman's Great Plains rifle. And whereas it's not a 100% authentic Hawken type rifle, it's pretty darn close for a modern reproduction. And the Lyman Company really is to be commended. They did a pretty good job in preserving the essentials of this kind of rifle. This is 54 caliber. It has a slow twist barrel for shooting round balls, so its accuracy leaves a little bit to be desired with conicals. Now, I'd much prefer to be using fixed open barrel sights, but my eyes won't do it anymore. So one of the nice things about this rifle is that Lyman has designed their standard aperture target sight to fit on this rifle. And yeah, it's cheating a bit, but it helps me keep shooting, and I haven't had to go to a telescopic sight yet. So with that in mind, we're going to cut to the chase here, and we'll start talking about how to load this thing. Well, the first thing you should do, assuming you're starting out with a clean rifle, is you want to wipe your preservatives out of the barrel. Now, here's a dandy little tool, and if you can get your hands on one of these, I'd recommend it. This is an old U.S. military surplus Browning 50 caliber machine gun cleaning rod. It's a steel rod that has sections that screw together. And one of the nice things about this particular cleaning rod is they come long enough that you can clean just about any muzzle loading rifle that you encounter with it, up to a Brown Bess musket with a really long barrel. To work on anything about 32 caliber and up. And if you can lay your hands on one, buy it, although the price is apt to be a little higher than the 50 cents I gave for this one 50 years ago. As far as your patch holder, one of the easiest ways to go is with an old worn out shotgun cleaning brush. Believe it or not, many years ago, that was a 12 gauge brush, and it's just been worn down over the years. But you very rarely, if ever, will lose a patch this way. So let's wipe her out, get the preservative out of the barrel. Not much in there. And these are Lyman's Butch's cleaning patches. For a pre-made factory patch, these things are first rate. And I would highly recommend that you buy some of them. And for many years, I cut my own patches out of flannel cloth and worn out shirts and stuff like that. And I have to tell you, these are about the best cleaning patches I've ever used. Now, the next thing to do is snap a couple of caps to make sure that the nipple's open. And there's your percussion caps. We're using CCI caps, and they are, in this rifle, just a bit weak. I don't usually have any problems with the RWS or the Remington caps, but sometimes I get erratic ignition with these, and we have enlarged the nipple hole in order to get a little better ignition. I'm not knocking CCI because I've used their stuff for years, and it's generally speaking pretty good stuff, but in this rifle, the rifle doesn't like them too much. It's 2021, and we're in the middle of the great arms shortage, so we're lucky to have caps, and that's why we're using these. Now, what you want to do, and I don't know if you can get this on camera or not, but get close to some vegetation. If your bore and your nipple are clear, this should move this leaf a little bit when you snap the cap. Did you see that? And we'll do it again just to make sure. Okay. We're using Graf's Shoot Some German powder today. We're going to use a powder charge of about 60 grains. That's, by some standards, a fairly light charge for a 54 caliber rifle, but it's what the U.S. military settled on for their charge for the Mississippi rifle, and it seems to produce fairly good accuracy in this rifle. One of the important things to know is don't pour your powder directly out of this flask into the gun. It's been known for well over 200 years that there's a probability if there's a spark left in the barrel, it'll flash off and cause you problems you wish you didn't have. So transfer your powder to a powder measure, pour it down the bore, and now we're going to put our patching in. This is mattress ticking. You want to have 100% cotton or some other natural fiber. You don't want to use a polyester blend because plastic in the cloth will melt and cause you problems. You should wash it to get the sizing out of the fabric. And this is a patch grease, which is a mixture of beef tallow, which is a fancy word for hamburger grease, beeswax with a little bit of olive oil in it. Now, there are pretty good commercial black powder patch lubes. The Wonder Wad stuff is good. The Thompson Center boar butter is good. And any number of them are good, but I prefer my homemade goop. Normally, we would use pre-cut patching, and we would grease these ahead of time, but a lot of people are cutting their patching in the field, and they're probably greasing it in the field, and this way you get to see how to do it. These are none of them perfect balls. They're cast in the Lee 6-cavity mold, and we have selected non-perfect balls just to give you an idea about what the average person might be using. If you were serious about target shooting, you would probably be weighing these balls and passing them through some sort of gauge to ensure the diameter was all the same. Now, with this particular ball and patch combination, I believe we'll be able to start this with our thumb. There we go. Get it seated just a little bit below the muzzle depth. And then we'll take our patch cutting knife. And we'll cut off the excess. And you should be able then to ram this down. And what you want to do is you want to do this in as smooth a stroke as you can and to seat it with about the same amount of pressure on the powder every time. Consistency is important. Now, what you'll see guys do who've got a patch that's too tight or a dirty bore is they'll ram the bullet down like that. And the problem with that is you cannot get consistent results, and your point of impact will vary depending on how the bullet is deformed and how you're seating it on the powder and a lot of other factors. So you want to try to do everything as consistently as possible. All right, so moving to the shooting position. Sit down, put a fresh cap on, and the first shot that comes out of a clean barrel on this gun usually does not shoot to the same point of impact as when you're shooting for group with a followed bore. So let's see what we're going to get here. probably gonna stop and go down and look at that right now. Okay, so here's our first shot out of the clean barrel, a little bit to the left, and that's a little bit me and a little bit the rifle. But as you can see, we're well within that dinner plate standard. So we'll go down and wipe out the barrel and then commence shooting a 3-shot group, and we'll see what we get. If I was to be in the field and was hunting and would want to reload right after I had fired that, I'd be able to reload this fairly easily. However, since we're kind of interested in seeing what kind of accuracy we're going to get, we're going to wipe after each shot, which of course back in the old days was something that they frequently did if they were shooting for accuracy rather than speed. So what we're going to do is do a wet patch, and this is just plain old ordinary tap water. And wipe the bore a couple of times, and then we're going to wipe it with a dry patch. Now, once again, consistency. So let's agree we're going to wipe twice. 1, 2, and that's what your patch looks like. And we're going to flip it over. See how nice that old worn-out shotgun brush works as a patch holder. And this is our dry patch. 1, 2, 1, 2. And you can save this patch you use to dry the bore out and use it next time as your wet patch. All right. Powder charge. And some people don't like these shoots and powders. They have the advantage of being A, relatively expensive, and here in 2021 you can actually get them. And I would tell you that whereas they may not be as good in terms of fouling and stuff as most, say, expensive modern black powders, they certainly are probably better than the average powder that was available on the frontier in the pre-Civil War days. A lot of that powder was homemade or was traded from a neighbor who was making his own powder, and it was pretty bad stuff. And that's one of the reasons why you read about enormous powder charges being used back in the old days. Is powder simply was not very powerful because the ingredients like saltpeter and sulfur were of dubious chemical composition. Most of the black powder was made with saltpeter that came out of manure piles or bat guano or caves or some such stuff. And a lot of the sulfur was mined out of a vein of sulfurous coal. Also, the lead was not particularly pure. There's a lot of little holes around here in the Ozarks where lead was just dug out of the ground in the form of galena, melted down and made into bullets. And so there were impurities in it, which caused inconsistencies in the hardness and castability of the lead. So by and by, the materials you're working with are a lot better than what was commonly available in the old days. All right, so that was our ball seated again. Let's see how she rams down now with a slightly dirty bore. Not bad at all. Okay, and we'll go ahead and shoot this. And once again, sitting down. Cap on. Ned Roberts says that in the old days, the cheapest caps that were available were French, and they were sold under the trade name of GB caps, which he says old-time riflemen said was short for well-known profanity. And I have to tell you, when the gun don't go off, I feel that way about these. But let's see what happens here. Yep. Try another cap and see what happens. We're going to have to primer. So turn the...
Rolling.
Okay, here's the two tools we're going to use. This is a nipple wrench. We're going to unscrew the nipple. This is a flintlock pan primer. There's 4F black powder in here, and the way this works is you push down the nozzle, it'll dispense a tiny amount of 4F powder. So we're going to unscrew this nipple. We'll put this in the nipple hole, push it down. And can you get a close-up on that? Tiny amount of very fine-grained powder in there. And we'll give it a thump to the side to move it down into the flash channel. Put this back in. Screw her down. By the way, this is a good way to prime your gun when you're going hunting to make sure that it absolutely, positively will go off. Sit down and put another cap on it. Now we may get a bit of a hang fire out of this. Let's see what we got. Besides butterfly on the barrel, he's probably not going to like being on there when this goes off. Okay, well this time, let's try blowing through the barrel and make sure our channel's open. See the smoke come out of the nipple? And since you probably aren't interested in watching me wipe the barrel out again and go through the whole loading thing again, we're going to turn this off and we'll come back after we've shot another 2 shots and show you what kind of group we're working on.
Rolling.
Okay, so in true Murphy's fashion, we didn't have any more failures of ignition when we weren't running the camera, but there's your group. This is our first shot, second shot, third shot, fourth shot. And I would say that any deer that was foolish enough to be standing down here would be pretty dead at this point. So with a loose, fairly loose ball and patch combination, it's easy to load. You can have an awful lot of fun plinking informal shooting, or you're good to go for a lot of hunting situations. And these groups don't run that much bigger out at 100 yards, but quite frankly, I've got problems seeing the targets that far out. Now, let's talk about troubleshooting a little bit. Back in the old days, when a gun wouldn't group, when you couldn't do that, it was held to be witched. And there's a couple of ways to fix that. One is you borrow patching from somebody else, and you hand them back their patching after you've loaded your rifle, and that's how you switch the hoodoo over to the guy who owns the patching. That doesn't work. What you want to do is unbreech the contrary thing and put it where running water can run through the barrel, and that'll get the spell out of your rifle barrel and it'll shoot through again. Now, I'm sure that's very useful information, and take it home and use it. And remember, the only safety that's worth a damn is the safety that's between your ears. Thanks for watching. We'll see you later.